Welcome to the Motivational Interviewing, Building a Foundation for Effective Patient Engagement in Team-Based Care conference call. My name is Danielle, and I will be your operator for today's call. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Later, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. Please note that this conference is being recorded. I will now turn the call over to Ashley Green. Ashley, you may begin.
Thanks, Danielle, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending this afternoon's follow-up motivational interviewing webinar with me. It was a pleasure to see all of you at last week's workshop. We had just some wonderful energy in the room. A lot of folks came up and talked to us afterwards and said what a great class it was, what a wonderful instructor Mia was, and I want to remind folks to please fill out an evaluation form, which would have been emailed to you. I think a lot of those have come back, but if you haven't had a chance yet, please do send us that feedback. It's very helpful for us, and it's also useful to show our funders why we need to keep bringing Mia back. So think of your future colleagues as well, because our hope is to continue to offer classes like this with Mia in the future. So please do that, and also at the end of this webinar, our WebEx friends will pop up a quick evaluation too. If you don't mind taking 30 seconds to fill that out, we would appreciate it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mia, and let's have a great webinar. Thanks.
Thanks, Ashley, and I just want to echo his thanks for a really great time last week in our face-to-face workshop. It's always so much easier to do my job when I'm in a room full of really engaged people who are participating at such a high level and really working, to make sense of the material and really to think about how these practices of motivational interviewing might work in your day-to-day world. And so I like the hard work that was happening in the room. I certainly was tired the next day, and I imagine you guys were as well. So the intention of this follow-up call is just to give us a little bit of overflow time from that face-to-face workshop and make sure that we're addressing everybody's needs. So just as a brief reminder, hopefully at the end of this entire series, which will be ending today, you'll feel like you know those 4 key components of the spirit of MI. You've got some of those skills down, at least at a basic level, and that if you choose to, you could apply at least one MI strategy to your clinical population and integrate that into your work to support self-management for people with hypertension and diabetes, or whatever population you're really choosing to focus on. And then part of what we're going to spend our time today on the call is really thinking about a plan for your own future development towards proficiency in MI. So today, really thinking about focusing on that integration. What, if any, if you've had a couple short days to try some of these things out in the real world, what barriers have you encountered, either in trying to put those things into practice or just sort of, at least theoretically, as you think about how will I put this into practice, what kinds of things are having you feeling a little bit stumped that you want to spend a little time on, and what kinds of things have you tried in terms of putting these into practice. And then looking at, I'm going to share with you some resources that have proven for other groups to be particularly useful, so that you've got a little bit of a walkthrough of some of those. So that's my hope today. So we've got everybody muted right now. We will have a chance later in the call when we unmute people. But in the meantime, if you have a particular question, and we already gotten some, particular things you'd like to hear a little bit about, think about together, or experiences that you want to share, please feel free to type them into the chat box, and we'll be sort of moderating those from here, so that can inform what I share a little bit about as we go forward. So first, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the process of kind of keeping this alive and carrying it forward. So we know that learning MI is really, it's a developmental process. And if you really want to do this to the point where you're able to realize some of the real outcomes that the research promises, it really does require a bit of an investment of both time and energy on your part. So thinking about how are we going to structure that up if that's something you choose to do. We know from the research on how people learn and acquire MI skills is that people learn best when they have repeated opportunities to practice, not just the little bit of practice time you got in the workshop, but some repeated opportunities to practice these skills that you've learned and to receive some feedback on how you're doing, whether it's from an outside observer or sort of there's some ways to just give yourself some feedback and get some data a little bit about how you've been doing. And then an opportunity to really incorporate this feedback into your practice. So that's what we know. If we were going to set up sort of a Cadillac level of MI learning, we would want to make sure to include all of those things in your individualized learning plan. So as you go, right, so we don't all have a coach sitting by our side every minute, but there's some pretty reliable signposts. One of the things that you do have is the opportunity to be collecting feedback sort of from the world, from the people that you work with and how their reactions are, and then also just from your own perception of how things are going. So some potential signposts that you might be going in the right direction in MI would be if you find yourself listening more and talking less, right? That's a really good, I think we talked about that in one of the video examples that we saw. That's a really good high-level assessment for what's going on here. Are you doing more of the talking, or are you allowing the other person the opportunity to do more of the talking? And are you giving priority to their perception, their perspective, their experiences? Are you finding ways, using some of those strategies that we went over, to ask for the other person's own arguments for change? Or are you finding yourself sort of falling into our traditional pathway of just supplying those arguments on your own? If you're finding that you're talking yourself into the change, you might think about taking a step back, taking a breath, and asking a question instead. I find, even after years of doing this and talking about it all the time and all of that, I still fall into the trap of sometimes just wandering down that path of trying to twist somebody's arm into doing something. And the wonderful thing is that as a human being, I can be a little vulnerable with the person in front of me and just say, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I sort of fell into the trap of trying to convince you to make this change when really it's your decision whether you want to make this change or not, and my arguments don't matter as much as yours. So I guess I want to shift a little bit and ask you, what would be your thoughts about making this change? Why do you think it might make sense from your perspective? Because my perspective is the least important of the two in this matter. And just owning that, if you catch yourself doing that, just owning it and saying that to the other person and then giving them an opportunity to give voice to their own arguments if there are any there. You also can get some indication that you're in the right direction if you're helping the other person identify successes and strengths. If you find yourself asking permission before you launch into giving advice or education or recommendation. Having sort of our first priority being to understand the other person versus to fix it or correct them or educate them or inform them. And then to remind you of our pretty ambitious threshold of we want to be doing more reflecting than asking. So our really lofty stretch goal there is 2 times as many reflections as questions. But even just having it a baseline, thinking about doing some more reflection and doing some less relying just on questions to move our way through the conversation. So those are all sort of some fairly high level, don't require a whole lot of attention to specific details or collecting data, just some things you can be paying attention to in yourself or in others, and you definitely have that opportunity as well. I know a number of you came in groups from various organizations, so if you have at least a partner, one potential strategy would be to just ask each other's permission to do some observation, whether it's by being in the room or being sort of over the cubicle, hearing over the cubicle how they're doing, or actually capturing audio tapes and sharing it with the other person. But getting some really high-level indications of, am I heading in an MI direction or not? That's my work. So some potential next steps beyond this learning opportunity would be to do some additional reading, view some more videos, and potentially engage in some online learning. There's becoming more and more distance education resources available that certainly don't replace that face-to-face hands-on learning, but they can really supplement it and extend what we're able to get out of it in terms of how much value we can squeeze out of our scant face-to-face time. A really great next step, and this quite frankly is how most people take a lot of steps on their MI journey, is just doing some experimenting on your own. Try stuff out with the patients you work with. Put something into practice. Say, hey, I'm going to try this question here that's a strategy for evoking change talk. Give it a try. See how it goes. Be paying attention to how people respond or don't respond to it, and then adjusting accordingly. There's also the MI workbook, which can be a really great resource in that it has short readings and then activities that you can do. Some of the activities are, writing activities. Some of them are things you can grab a partner or two and, do a little exercise together. Some of them are more, I guess we would call them soft activities that you could be doing, as you're driving in the car or listening to the radio or watching TV, things you can be doing to just kind of adjust your mindset toward a more MI way. In a more or less formal way, you could join a learning community, find some other peers. Like I said, there's definitely some natural peer groups that showed up at the workshop, but even if you were a solo one, there are some local or regional groups of people, and you can reach out to me if you're all by your lonesome and looking for other people who might be working on their MI skills, or, reach out within your own network to see, is this something that, hey, has anybody been to an MI workshop? Would they be interested in an MI book club or an MI discussion group to keep continuing moving forward? You can always record yourself practicing either with someone that you're going to do some role play or some non-professional supportive listening and MI with, or a patient if you have the proper sort of institutional support around that and permission to do that. And then you can listen back on your own. There's definitely a lot to be learned from that process. What we find is that people's self-perception of what they're doing and how they're doing it is pretty different from the reality. And so even just listening back to your own and counting how many questions versus how many reflections, or counting how many times you give advice and did you ask permission first, or timing how many of the minutes was I talking versus how many minutes the other person was talking. Doing a little bit of that more objective gathering of information, and then comparing it to what you expected it to be, and then thinking about, is it where you want it to be, and if not, how do you want to move it in that direction? There are advanced trainings you can attend, and so that would be another possibility for extending your learning. And there are people who do provide some coaching on MI either within organizations or just individually, that you could reach out and get some MI coaching and work with an MI coach. So those are all, there's sort of a wide range of intensity of those next steps, and you can think about which ones might feel like they make the most sense for you. I'm sure you have ideas individually as well about some potential next steps, and I invite, if you have some thoughts about what your own next steps are going to be, I invite you to pop them in the chat box. So, and if you want to share it to all participants, then we can see just sort of what other people are thinking they might want to continue doing around MI, or what they've at least thought about doing. So some potential resources, and this is not in particular an endorsement of any one thing, but I just want to give you some familiarity with what's out there. So the Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers is an organization that I am a member of. It basically is people who have done training work in motivational interviewing and want to be connected to others, so it's not a certifying body or anything like that. But there are some resources publicly available posted on that website. So that is one potential resource for you. Guilford Press is the book that has published the majority of the books in motivational interviewing. So they have, if you are on their particular website, you can just search for the applications of motivational interviewing series, and there's a whole host of different resource books that look at particular angles of motivational interviewing. So there's the main book, the Motivational Interviewing, Helping People Change, which is sort of the general textbook. That's our first one over here. And then, that's a horrible arrow I just drew. There we go. And then there's the Building Motivational Interviewing Skills Workbook. There's also some applications, so motivational interviewing in healthcare, motivational interviewing in diabetes care, motivational interviewing in nutrition and fitness. And really what's different about those is just the examples that it provides. And it does get a little more specific. So if you have a particular area of specialty and you'd like to have some particular examples to work your way through and some case scenarios that are there, those books do exist. The other nice thing, if you go to the Guilford Press website, is all of those books have a sample chapter that's available. If you go to click on the book, and then along the menu options, one option is sample chapter, so you could read a chapter of the book before you make any sort of investment in purchasing anything. These books are available through other booksellers as well, so you certainly don't have to go to the website for the Guilford Press, but they do have some free resources available on their website that you could utilize whether you make any purchase or not. So those are sort of some of the book resources. I'm also just now going to walk you through some of the online resources that are available that you may want to partake in. And all of these are available free of charge, so not endorsing anyone to purchase anything, but these are some ways that you could maybe plan in your calendar a certain amount of time out. Hey, if this, 6 months from now I'm going to do one of these because that would be a good refresher, or something along those lines. I've heard from other participants that that's been useful, and I've also found that in my own work. Just doing some of these online things every now and then is just a really great way to make sure that I'm staying refreshed and on point with my skills. So the British Medical Journal, that's BMJ, British Medical Journal, has some free learning resources, and one of them is motivational interviewing in brief consultation. So this has a medical focus, and the examples are primarily physicians, but it's available to anyone. And so what it has is some brief modules that you click through, and then there's also some very nice video examples of Stephen Wolnick, who's one of the original authors of Motivational Interviewing, the Motivational Interviewing book, and has done a lot of the research and writing in motivational interviewing. He's in these video examples, he's portraying a clinician, a physician actually, with a variety of different patients. So those are some nice resources. I think at the end you do get a certificate of completion, which doesn't really do anything other than potentially your organization could use that as if they wanted to enforce it or advocate for that as something that a variety of people go through and utilize. So it's got some online modules, some interactive quiz questions, those types of things, and then some videos to look at. And if you just, what I have up at the top, the BMG Learning Motivational Interviewing, if you use that as your sort of, in your search engine, as your search term, it will get you there. I don't like to provide the direct hyperlinks because they often change on me. The next resource that I want to share with you is also available free of charge, and it's sponsored by the American Academy of Pediatrics Institute for Healthy Childhood Weight, and they worked with a company to develop this app that is available so you can access it online through your computer, or you can download it from the App Store, Google Play, or your Windows Phone store onto a tablet or a smartphone. And it is a little bit of a sort of avatar-driven scenario. So in this scenario there, you can see in the picture there's a pediatrician and a child and a parent. And in this, you're sort of navigating your way through a conversation with the child and the parent. You're in the role of the pediatrician, and you're navigating your way through this conversation about healthy weight. And it gives you little sort of drop-down boxes in terms of choose your own adventure style. So it'll say, the little video will play a little bit of an introduction on the part of the pediatrician, and then a box will pop up asking you, what do you want to do next? And you've got a menu. Do you want to ask a question? Do you want to give some advice? Do you want to ask, do you want to ask a question about how school's going? Do you want to give advice? Do you want to ask a question about what they eat at home? I don't remember exactly what some of the scenarios are. And then it, based on what you select, then the video will progress a little further, and then it'll pause and ask you what you want to do. So you can play out, how different choices that you might make throughout the conversation can impact the responses that you get. The other nice thing is there's, if you can sort of move your cursor around, and if you hover over the child's head at times, you can see sort of what they might be thinking and not saying, and the same thing for the mother. And you can also, there's a little bit of a scale that shows their motivation level, and you can see whether it's moving or not. So I find that this is nice. It's a nice way to practice some of that strategic thinking behind MRI and when you might use which skill. And you don't necessarily have to have complete confidence and mastery in your skill level, so you don't have to necessarily know, oh, hey, I can pull off a reflection, no problem. You just have to know, I want to see what happens when I reflect here. What will this patient and this mother do or say or think or feel? So that's a nice one, and again, free of charge. So if you're like me and you can easily kind of get sucked into some of these games, you might find that you spend some time with these. I like to play around with it every once in a while and just see, oh, hey, if I try this. And there are also built into the program some little education modules as well that review the skills and some of the spirit elements. So you can always, if you find yourself getting stuck and you're not sure why you would be doing one thing or another, you can go back to the education part as well. A couple more online resources, and then we'll shift to talking about some of the questions that you guys have shared. NIDA, so the National Institute for Drug Abuse, has what they call a blending initiative. So they're looking to blend some of these skills into normal practice. So this one is a motivational interviewing course. It does provide some CE, CMEs, and again, it's free of charge. And the particular focus is talking to patients about health risk behaviors. So the National Institute for Drug Abuse's sort of angle on this is that they would like to see particularly the patients that are in substance abuse treatment programs engaging better with their physical health as well. So looking at health risk behaviors, and again, this is from a health practitioner point of view. So there you can earn CEs, I think, for nurses or physicians. And there's some simulations with the patient with, again, it's a video, and then it'll pause and ask you what you want to do, and you can see the patient's reaction to that, talking about diet and exercise and medication adherence. I believe are the behaviors that they're looking at. And there is also, an online instruction component as well. So at this point, any questions about any of the resources or other resources that I didn't share, you can put those in the chat box. The other thing that I would invite you to share are your thoughts about next steps. So what next steps might make sense to you? What of all those things seems appealing? So you can type that into the chat box. You can turn to your neighbor and tell them out loud if you're sitting there with a group of people. Just thinking for a minute here. Here's our second. Didn't do the first elicit, but I provided some information, and now I'm eliciting from you, or exploring with you from our Explore Offer Explore. I'm exploring with you what of all these things seems appealing to you or feels doable to you.
And Danielle, can you remind folks how to ask a question over the phone, please?
If you have a question, please press star then 1 on your touch-tone phone. If you wish to remove from the queue, please press the pound sign or the hash key. There will be a delay before the first question is announced. If you are using a speakerphone, you may need to pick up the handset first before pressing the numbers. Once again, if you have a question, please press star then 1 on your touch-tone phone. Standing by for questions. Once again, if you do have a question, please press star then 1. And I am showing no audio questions at this time.
Okay, thanks, Danielle. We did have, thank you, Sarah, on the chat box shared that she likes the idea of revisiting the materials and looking at the modules again in a few months as a way to keep MI sort of in the forefront of your mind. And Nina has shared also that she likes all the website options and can't wait to try them out. I'll also remind folks that, and if you didn't get this and you need it, on the table as you exited the workshop, there was also a one-page handout that had a whole list of other websites. Most of those were videos that you could watch, sort of my curated list of MI videos that I have found useful. So that's another option that I didn't review on this call, but that is out there as well. So yeah, I certainly have found in my own life that I'm a little bit of a slave to my calendar. So if I choose now to go in and say in 3 months, put a reminder on my calendar, it's much more likely to happen than if I just sort of say, oh yeah, I'm going to mentally file this away and I'll get to it when I have some downtime. I find that I never get to it. So that's something that works for me, but you'll know best what works for you. All right.
Sorry, Nina. I was just going to make a quick comment. I thought of you the other day, and I spoke with my colleague Rebecca Cohen about this. I've been discovering in some of the social psychology books that I like to read that there's a lot of hard science to back up the effectiveness, probably in a way that is surprising to some people. Functional MRIs can actually show, and it's not always called motivational interviewing per se, but some of these strategies that are used in working with folks in a functional MRI setting, you can actually see the reward centers in people's brains lighting up when they're kind of put into this context in terms of questioning and being able to sort of share their own insights as opposed to being put on the defensive by other questions. I'm seeing that crop up a lot in some of the research on neuroscience. So I just thought I would share that you can actually see the effect of what amounts to motivational interviewing impacting someone's brain. And you don't have to take my word for it. You could certainly do a little research in this area too.
Yeah, thanks. There definitely is. I think that's going to be sort of our next frontier of the research, is that we're going to start to be able to bring together sort of some of what we know from the neurobiology and all of our emerging brain science along with our interventions and start to map out, that this isn't just some soft, nice, loosey-goosey kind of thing. This is really, really hard science as well. And we also had an additional comment on the chat that Beth Martin shared that her clinic team chats about MI in practice at least once a week, and they share examples of what went well and areas where they might have missed an opportunity and think about, what they might do next time. So all excellent ideas and thoughts about moving forward and keeping it fresh. Because this is true of, this isn't specific to MI, but we know this is true of a lot of different things that, when we stop paying attention to it, it stops happening. So it definitely, for me at least, still has not gotten to the point years and years in where it's just second nature and it can automatically run. So I wanted to address some of the questions that we have gotten either initially, some of the questions that came up out of the workshop, and then there have been a few in the chat box. So if you have other questions that you want to make sure we do, we've got some time, so I'm going to go through them now. So one of the initial questions, and I'll be inviting you guys to think together too, because I'm not the only expert in the room on all this stuff. But one of the initial questions was how to interact when emotions run high with the person. So when someone is really in that defensive space, and we know that, people come to us from a variety of different perspectives, and, sometimes they've had so many past negative interactions with the health care team. Sometimes they're just really not in a good space. Sometimes it's really vulnerable and scary for them to think about some of the behavior changes that we're asking them to make. So when someone is, angry or highly emotional in some other way, or, really showing a high degree of defensiveness, what are some useful approaches? And I can certainly tell you from my point of view, and I'll be interested to hear, so if anybody wants to add on to my response, please, that will only make it richer. But from my point of view, empathy, and showing that mostly through empathetic reflective listening. So that would be a time when we would choose maybe to not be so forward-moving and quick to go to our change talk reflections. If someone is showing a lot of emotion, we might just reflect that emotion. And I think if you think about the example video we watched with Sal talking about his dog, and we saw the practitioner in the second example really just saying, this is something that you're going to want to spend some time thinking about because this is really important to you. You've got a lot of feelings about this. I can say that when you are going to reflect emotion, with anger, reflecting that you're really angry about this tends to diffuse some of the anger. With more of that sort of sad feeling or, this is a big loss to you, feels really sad for you to think about having to give that up. When you reflect and name that with patients, be prepared. That in some ways is giving them permission to feel it. And at least in my experience, I get a lot of criers then when I'll say, yeah, it's really sad. It's like all of a sudden I've given them permission to feel that sad feeling, and they're going to feel it right there in that moment. So being prepared for that is a good thing because we don't want to freak out when somebody starts showing some emotion. Just holding that safe space for them and letting them be sad and really it doesn't necessarily always feel like the most productive use of our time to just sit with someone while they feel their feelings. But I can certainly tell you that letting someone move through those feelings of anger that they have to make these life changes or sadness that they have to make these life changes can help remove some very big obstacles. And so just recognizing those things and giving voice, you can give voice to them in a gentle way and in a way that's going to, allow them to feel like that emotion has been acknowledged. That can help. That can really help sort of resolve it for them or start to resolve it for them. And just the other thing is, just being okay with the fact that sometimes someone is going to be angry and sometimes, and that there's nothing wrong with anything that anybody feels. People are entitled to their feelings about things, and I've also found that, sometimes the most useful thing I can do for someone is to say, I can see you're really upset and I can see you're super frustrated today. I wonder, does it even make sense for us to try and continue this conversation today? Or should we try and schedule another time when you're feeling a little more like talking about this? And just giving them permission. A lot of times giving them that out and giving them the choice, they'll surprise me by saying, no, let's stay and let's get this, let's do this today. When I totally expect that if I give them that out, they're gone out the door. But again, returning a little bit of that self-control to the other person and letting them say, I'm choosing to be here today, can help us move forward in a productive way. Other people's thoughts about how you might use MI or other interactions with folks when they're showing high emotion. You can type in the chat box or, again, I think it's *1.
Yes, if you do have a question, please press star then 1. I'm showing no audio questions at this time.
Okay. So I'll move on to the next one. If you have something to add, feel free to add it. So we had a couple questions about youth or adolescents, particularly with type 1 diabetes, eating disorders, something that they're pretty frustrated about the diagnosis. They don't want to be there. They don't want to be having that conversation. And how do we manage that? I guess in part, my response is the same as for folks with a high emotions. And I guess as I'm saying this, I'm thinking, gosh, I wonder, there's not a whole lot of things that my response wouldn't be reflect with empathy. Because that's kind of one of my most basic strategies that I try with people in almost any challenging situation for me is reflect with empathy. But definitely, for adolescents, for that younger population, emphasizing choice is really important. So, particularly when they maybe haven't had a choice about a lot of things, right? Young people with type 1 diabetes, there's a lot of things that aren't in their control, so helping them identify what things are in their control, and also, helping them feel like at least they're in control of what's happening relationally between the two of you. And so, if they give short answers, sometimes that's all you're going to get. You can try to draw them out and into more conversation by reflecting on those short answers and, reflecting in a way, maybe trying to continue the paragraph. So think about what would they say if they hadn't just stopped talking. Part of it is, being okay with the fact that that's how they're going to be, and, recognizing that the best you can do is give them opportunities to do that. And also for some people who aren't as much of a out loud verbal processor, recognizing that they may still be doing the internal work of thinking through responses to the questions that they're just not giving voice to. So, not just giving up because you're getting short, really curt, sort of short abbreviated answers, but recognizing that a lot of the work goes on inside people's heads. I'm part of a study right now where we're doing some MI groups with children, I think 7 is the youngest, up to teenagers with type 1 diabetes and their parents. And what we found is that, so they sign up and they take part in 4 groups with an MI focus, just talking about their management of their condition. And, in the first session, we do some introductions and, we do some activities and it's very, very common that the parents are doing most of the participating and the kids are sort of grudgingly sitting there with their arms crossed. And another really common observation is that when they come back for the second session, we're hearing reports that the kids have been referencing things that were said or thinking about, or they themselves are reporting, hey, when you said this last time or when we did this exercise, I kind of thought it was dumb, but then I found like I was still thinking about it later, and then I noticed this. So, it's like the work is happening anyway. So sometimes it's just about adjusting our expectations of what we're looking for as a sign that we're being effective, and knowing, I don't think I shared with you, but one of the metaphors that has always stuck with me that I heard early on in my MI training is that sometimes our work is like putting pebbles in people's shoes, and we have to send them out into the world to walk around with those pebbles for a while before they might, get bothered enough by it to take their shoe off and do something. So just kind of adjusting our expectations a little bit. The other thing about people who tend to give short responses or who aren't necessarily, participating in a super high verbal way is to recognize that for some people who tend more toward introversion, finding some ways to preview what the conversation is going to be so they can feel prepared rather than put on the spot for some of the discussion. And in some cases, that's not necessarily going to be doable, but for some cases it is. And so thinking about, is there a way that we can do that for our patients or for one particular patient? And it might be something as simple as, in your introduction or when you're doing that agenda matching exercise, giving enough of a preview of the things that you're going to want to talk to them about so that they can have a few minutes lead time while they talk about some of the easier stuff to be prepared to talk about some of the other stuff as well. Questions or thoughts about that? Catching up on the chat box as well here.
Once again, if you do have a question, please press star then 1. And I'm showing no audio questions at this time.
Okay. So, another strategy with a really quiet person might be to just reflect on that. And sometimes I'll do some of that just, wondering out loud. Particularly if it's someone who is just a quiet individual, that's one thing, versus if you have somebody who's normally more chatty and they're sort of unusually quiet. I might use a different approach, but wondering out loud, saying, I noticed that you're not saying a whole lot about your thoughts about this. I wonder, is there something going on that we should be talking about instead, or is it really just kind of something maybe that you don't have a lot to say about, or what do you think is going on here? And, just inviting them. Again, in that spirit of partnership, it's like I can't be a true partner with someone if I'm not inviting them in. And so for me, making my thoughts and my questions and my concerns a little more transparent in the interaction can prove to be helpful as well. So let's see. Sorry. So a comment in the chat box about a patient who was really spending a lot of time talking about concerns about her son's health issues and the ways that he's not caring for himself, but then also, moving a little deeper, discovering that the patient herself was also not helping herself. And so using that as a way to help her think about how much she improved her quality of life. And we've got a report that they definitely used that reflective empathy and some questions to guide the patient as they sorted out ideas and set up a plan to make some changes. So that's some reports of using the semi in practice, and it sounds like finding some good places where it makes sense and where it fits well. Let's see. So the other question that I've had is, for doing telephonic patient experience work. So often the caller is very angry initially, and asking about ideas for how to diffuse that anger quickly, so that the patient's concerns can be discussed. I guess, part of it is, as we already discussed, naming that, acknowledging the anger. I think people tend to, especially when we find someone who is repeating themselves over and over again, people tend to repeat themselves when they feel that they're not heard. So really making sure that you're as on point as possible with your reflective listening, so that you can be showing, I am listening, I'm trying to understand your perspective, versus saying, I'm listening, I'm trying to understand your point of view. Saying that is often frustrating for people when they hear it, but showing it through reflective listening can be more useful. I guess my other thought on that is that sometimes our urgency around diffusing that anger, like I have to hurry up and move them through their angry space, can be the thing that gets in the way of actually productively working through it. So I find for myself, if I can use whatever strategies I know work best for myself to keep myself calm, and recognize that their anger is going to diffuse, in some ways on their own timeline, and I have to sort of honor that and be very respectful of that they have a right to be angry, and their perspective, their feelings are very valid. And, if it's to the point where you're on a call that, can't be productive because they're so angry, even just acknowledging that and saying, gosh, I can tell you're really angry about this, and I absolutely want to work with you so that we can, address your concerns and hopefully find a way to resolution. I wonder if it makes sense for us to find a time when your anger is not feeling so intense and we can really just be talking about it. But just, giving them that choice and giving them that out again. And then being willing to just accept that. All right, a couple other things. So Melody wants to echo the Cognito resource. She said they've used it in training some pediatric nurses, and it has been really well received, and that it has a number of different scenarios and strategies to help guide the conversation. And a comment from Sarah that it does seem important to consider a person's personality while conducting MI. For example, she knows someone where it takes her several questions to get them rolling and talking, and knowing that it might take a few seconds to get comfortable or to share in-depth thoughts and feelings, or several minutes for them to feel comfortable seems key. So absolutely, recognizing that for a lot of people, the first thing out of their mouth is not going to be the most productive thing. With our urgency around pace, we sometimes forget that, I think, and want to just jump on the first thing out of someone's mouth and move forward with that. But finding some time to really explore, and think about is that might just be a warm-up response for them. So if you have other questions, we've got about 4 minutes left, and the poll has, so the evaluation question have popped up, so you can be answering those as you go if that works for you. But we've got a few more minutes if anybody else has any additional questions or comments that they want to share. You also have my email address, so as you move forward, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm more than happy. This is what I love to do. So I'm more than happy to talk through particular situations with you or point you in the direction of some more tailored resources for you or your team. Don't hesitate to reach out. If I can't help you, I'll let you know that too. But yeah, I guess I just want to echo that you guys have really been a great group to work with. I enjoy it so much, and I hope that this has been useful and productive for you guys and a good way to use a day and a couple hours of your time. I think your patients will definitely benefit from the effort that you've put into this up to this point and moving forward.
Well, Mia, I know I'm speaking for everyone who can't right now in echoing what a pleasure it's been to work with you and what a wonderful workshop you put on there. And as I've said several times before, let us know of your continued interest in motivational interviewing. I know, again, that you're filling out evals, and I thank you for that. But also let me know here at Metastar, too, because we're always looking for worthwhile programming and folks to partner with. And so let us know of your organization's interest in this. It's very helpful for us. And so with that, Mia, I want to thank you for putting on another excellent series. And I hope we get an opportunity to work with you again soon. I have a sneaking suspicion we may, and I certainly hope that to be the case. And thank you, everyone, for being on the call today. And again, please make sure you fill out those evals when you have a moment. And if there aren't any further questions, then we'll go ahead and say goodbye here. But we wish you the best and hope to see you or your colleagues soon.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may now disconnect.